Hello and welcome to another episode of Friendly Friday, a weekly series where we take a look at a budget standard or modern deck. This week the patrons of the channel voted for green-white cats in standard, so we're taking a look at a cat tribal deck with a small enchantment and a small tokens sub-theme, which we will cover in just a minute. So let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with our 1-drops, where we have Sacred Cat, a nice 1/1 lifelinker for just 1 mana, which also has Embalm, so we can get it back from the graveyard and get a 1/1 lifelinking cat token, which works nicely with our token sub-theme. Next up in the 2-drop slot we have Metallic Mimic, which may not look like a cat because it's a shapeshifter, so when it enters the battlefield we can choose a creature type, which will almost always be cat in this deck, so it will have cat as an additional creature type, and whenever another cat enters the battlefield under our control it will get an additional +1/+1 counter, so quite powerful especially when making multiple cat tokens that all get the additional +1/+1 counter. Next up we have Adorned Pouncer, another powerful 2-drop, so for 2 mana we get a 1/1 double striker, which is especially powerful if we can get it a +1/+1 counter through the Metallic Mimic, or give it +1/+1 some other way, like for example with the Regal Caracal, which we will get to in just a second. And Adorned Pouncer also has Eternalize, so for 5 mana we can exile it from the graveyard and make a 4/4 token that still has double strike, and that's especially powerful if we can double those tokens somehow. Then, taking a look at some of our removal spells, we have 4 copies of Stasis Snare, which is an enchantment with flash, so we can play it at instant speed, which just exiles one of the opponent's creatures, so nice instant speed removal spell, which is also an enchantment which plays nicely with our enchantment sub-theme, because we're also playing 2 copies of Benefaction of Rhonas, which is our card advantage card in the deck. So sorcery for 3 mana that says reveal the top 5 cards of your library, and then we can choose a creature and or enchantment card among those and put those in our hand and then the rest in the graveyard. So of course if we have multiple enchantments in the deck, then it's nice if we can find both an enchantment and a creature with the Benefaction, since that's a nice 2-for-1. And then the other cards going to the graveyard is also nice, since if we can spill over some Sacred Cats or Adorned Pouncers, then we get additional card advantage that way. So that's what the Benefaction of Rhonas is doing in the deck. Then we get to another very powerful payoff card for a cat tribal deck, which is Pride Sovereign. So for 3 mana we get a 2/2, but it's not gonna stay 2/2 for long, since the Pride Sovereign gets +1/+1 for each other cat you control. So often it's just gonna enter the battlefield as a 4/4 or a 5/5. And then for single white mana, tapping and exerting the Pride Sovereign, we can create 2 1/1 lifelinking cat tokens. So a nice repeatable way of making 2 1/1 cat tokens every other turn. And of course them having lifelink is also a big deal. Next up we have Anointed Procession, another enchantment to go with our enchantment sub-theme, so another card we can find with the Benefaction of Rhonas, and also plays very nicely with our token sub-theme, since whenever an effect would make a token, it would make double that amount of tokens instead. So all our Embalm creatures like Sacred Cat and our Eternalized creatures like Adorned Pouncer will make double the amount of tokens. Of course Pride Sovereign also doubles its tokens, and we have some more token cards up the curve, which we will get to in a second. Then we also have 2 copies of Cast Out, which is similar to Stasis Snare but can deal with any non-land permanents, so also Planeswalkers for example. It also has Cycling, so we can cycle it away for just single white mana if we need to draw something else. We also have 1 copy of Oketra the True, which looks like a cat but is not really a cat, but just works nicely with our token sub-theme. So for 4 mana we get a 3/6 double striking indestructible, but of course there's a little bit of a drawback here in that Oketra can't attack or block unless we control at least 3 other creatures, but she can also make tokens herself. For 4 mana we can make a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. So she's quite powerful in combination with some of our token cards and also with our Anointed Procession of course. Then we also have 1 copy of Crested Sunmare, which you may notice is not a cat, but it's still quite powerful and synergistic in this deck, since for 5 mana we get a 5/5 horse that says at the beginning of each end step, if we gained life during that turn, we can make a 5/5 horse creature token. And of course with all our life linking cards in the deck, it's not difficult to gain life and get that 5/5 horse token, and other horses you control have indestructible thanks to the Crested Sunmare. Making 1 horse token is already powerful, but if you can make multiple tokens, then you're gonna win the game quite easily. And then finally we have Regal Caracal, which works nicely with basically all our sub-themes, since for 5 mana we get a 3/3 cat that comes along with 2 1/1 cat creature tokens with lifelink, and other cats you control get +1/+1 and have lifelink. So that means that for 5 mana we get at the very least 7 power and toughness worth of cats, and all of the other cats in play will also get +1/+1 and lifelink, and if we have an Anointed Procession in play, then doubling those cat tokens is also very powerful. And then last but not least we have Ajani Unyielding, which kind of looks like a cat and is also quite powerful in this deck, since his +1 ability of revealing the top 3 cards and putting any non-land permanent in our hand is very powerful with all our enchantments in the deck, since even our removal spells like Stasis Snare and Cast Out count as non-land permanents that we can put into our hand. So Ajani's +2 is regularly gonna find us multiple cards, and then the -2 can also exile a creature, so another removal spell, and the -9 is also gonna win us the game quite easily. Then taking a quick look at our sideboard, we've got 2 copies of Authority of the Consuls, which comes in against the mono-red decks, where all their haste creatures will enter the battlefield tapped. We've got 1 copy of Fragmentize, which comes in against artifacts and enchantments, mostly against the vehicle decks, where we need a quick answer to a Heart of Kiran, for example. We've got 2 copies of Solemnity, which comes in against all the energy and +1/+1 counter decks. We have 2 copies of Fumigate, which come in especially against the zombies decks, but can also come in against some of the other green-black creature decks. 2 copies of Prowling Serpopard against the control decks, with lots of counter spells. Then 1 copy of Dusk to Dawn, which can come in against the green-black decks, where they have some very large creatures that Dusk will be able to deal with, and then Dawn can bring back some of our cats to our hand, including our very powerful Pride Sovereign. Then we also have 2 copies of Prepare to Fight, which can come in against the aggro decks, where gaining the life is important. So Prepare can untap one of our creatures, give it +2/+2 and lifelink, so that means that we can ambush one of the opponent's creatures when all our creatures are tapped, and of course especially combined with Adorned Pouncer that has double strike, giving it +2/+2 and lifelink is very powerful. And also untapping a creature can come in handy with our Pride Sovereign, since after we exert it we can untap it, so we can exert it again or maybe attack with it. And then last but not least, 3 copies of Crook of Condemnation, which comes in against all the graveyard decks that we might have trouble dealing with otherwise. So that's the deck, and now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand looks pretty good, so we'll keep. So we get to lead with a turn 1 Sacred Cat, and say go. And then we have double Anointed Procession to go with our Regal Caracal if we ever draw a second white source. There we go. So let's get in for 1. And pass a turn. So pretty slow hand, but a powerful one if our opponent can't interact with what we're trying to do. Blue-white looks like we're facing, so could be a control deck. Alright, Pride Sovereign, not a bad pickup here. Let's see if it gets countered. Nope, our opponent's just gonna cycle a farmland in response, so our Pride Sovereign resolves. The only awkward part here is that we can't play Anointed Procession and exert our Pride Sovereign, so we'll have to decide how we handle things. We might just attack with the Sovereign and then exert it a turn later after playing the second Procession if we draw land. Alright, Adorned Pouncer to draw. Opponent might also have removal spells that kill attacking creatures, in which case attacking with the Pride Sovereign might not be the best idea, but then we do get to resolve the Anointed Procession, so I think we do just attack with both here, rather than making our cat tokens, even though we could make the tokens and then play the Pouncer. I think I would rather just play the Procession this turn. Opponent takes it. Alright, so it's likely that the Procession gets countered, but We have a second one, so I don't mind running it out here. Alright, Stasis Snare instead on our Pride Sovereign. So our opponent was patient there. And wants to prevent us from exerting the Sovereign next turn and making 4 tokens. 4th land for the opponent, and they pass a turn. Alright, another Regal Caracal, but no 5th land. So I think we just attack for 1 and play a second Anointed Procession. Opponent might have a cast out here for one of the processions, or just a counterspell for this one. Instead they're going for a Glimmer of Genius, so they're trying to sculpt their hand here. And if they do manage to just counter our Caracals, then we don't really get a lot of benefit out of our processions until we eternalize our creatures at some point. So 5 mana for the opponent, full 7 cards in hand. And they're gonna tap out for a Jace Unraveler of Secrets. And they're gonna plus, and we don't have a lot of pressure in play, unfortunately. And if they have a Planar Outburst in hand, then even the Regal Caracal next turn is not gonna solve our problems. Instead, keep not finding our 5th land, so we're forced to just attack Jace and play out our Pouncer and Sacred Cat. And let's see if our opponent goes for a sweeper here, or if they're gonna be patient. They're gonna wait it out. They don't want to give us all these Embalm and Eternalize creatures in the graveyard. Opponent has to discard to hand size. And we draw another Pouncer. So let's just attack Jace with everyone and play another Pouncer here. Opponent might have another draw spell end of turn. Another Glimmer. 7 mana. Do they have Approach of the Second Sun here? They do, so they're gonna gain 7, and if they cast this spell again, they win the game, and they put this 6 cards down in their library, but with all their draw spells, they will probably be able to cast a second copy real soon. In fact, they already scry 1 and draw 1, so that's 2 cards gone if they scry to the bottom. So we really need a land right now, and even then it might be too late. Instead we draw an Ajani, which is not gonna do it here. So I think we do just kill the Jace here, prevent our opponent from getting closer to the approach, although at this point they probably have a second copy in hand. So they're gonna go for a big draw spell end of turn and then kill us next turn with the approach. So yeah, we're forced to play out our Regal Caracal here. Might have a counter for it. So they might just have a Fumigate for next turn and gain a whole bunch of life back. Opponent down to 5. But I imagine we'll see. Alright, cycle. Supreme Will. Alright, so they will find their approach with this Supreme Will. And there we go. Alright, so opponent wins the game. So got a little stuck on mana there and didn't really get to double anything until it was too late. So for this matchup we can bring in our Serpopards. We can also take out our Stasis Snare since our opponent's running next to no creatures. And let's see, Fragmentize can take care of a Stasis Snare or a cast out from the opponent. Take out another Stasis Snare. And I think that's about it for this matchup. Dawn would be nice to return creatures from our graveyard, but I think it's too slow since we also have to cast the Dusk part. So I think we'll just submit this and see how it goes. And we will be on the play. And this hand looks acceptable. Not the greatest, but I think we'll keep and we can cycle the cast out here. So I think we'll lead with Sacred Cat on turn 1. And then next turn we can play a tapped Vista and cycle our cast out. Hope to find some lands. Opponent cycles an Illumination. End of turn we'll cycle cast out. Another Vista. And a Fortified Village. Alright, so we can play the Village right now, revealing the Vista, and play the Benefaction. Opponent with a Censor or on our Benefaction, which we can't pay for, that's fine. There's Metallic Mimic, which we can play. And Ajani, which we can't play, so we'll just hit for 3 here. Hoping to draw lands. Anointed Procession gets censored as well. Opponent with 5 lands, but no double white yet. And Oketra's not bad if we can resolve it. Oketra resolves. Let's see if they have a Glimmer or a cast out here. Instead it's just a Hieroglyphic Illumination. So they do get to draw 2, but no scry 2. 6 lands. And there's a Fortified Village. Unfortunately don't get to play the Caracal here. But we can just make a token. Let's just do that right now. And see if we can move to combat. Opponent with a Stasis Snare on Oketra, I imagine. Opponent down to 8. Alright, so Let's see if they feel threatened enough to play a sweeper, or if they do just have the approach in hand. And looks like opponent does go for a Fumigate. Now we do get to untap and hopefully resolve our Caracal as we draw our second Ajani, which is a bit unfortunate. And that gets hit by an Essence Scatter. Do they have the approach now? Nope. Alright, I think we'll just play out an Ajani. If it gets countered, we have a second one. That works. +2. Finds Metallic Mimic and Pride Sovereign, which we can both take here. So that's not bad. Opponent didn't do anything end of turn, so their hand's probably reactive towards creatures. So let's keep plussing our Ajani. Find another Caracal and another Sovereign. Alright, so let's see. Got 7 mana at our disposal. So the most efficient use of mana would be Mimic plus Caracal, but it's very likely their opponent has a second Fumigate. So I think we just go with Mimic plus Sovereign. And then we can use our Caracal next turn to boost our cats that are already in play. And the Sovereign will also become huge. Stasis Snare on our Sovereign, I imagine. Opponent says go. And there's a Fragmentize, which can free up either Oketra or the Pride Sovereign. So let's start by plussing Ajani. Find a Serpopard and a Metallic Mimic. The original plan was to play the Regal Caracal, but we can't play the Caracal plus the Serpopard. I kind of like leading with the Serpopard, just so we can make sure our creatures resolve. And I would also like to use a Fragmentize, probably on the Oketra here, since that dodges a Wrath effect. Can probably start by playing out our Serpopard, and then we can still go Sovereign plus Fragmentize. And I want to play these first in case our opponent has something like a Blessed Alliance killing our Metallic Mimic. So I think I do just attack for 2 now. That works. Then try to Fragmentize the Stasis Snare. That works, and then play out the Pride Sovereign. Alright, and our opponent didn't find the answers, so we win. Would have ulted Ajani next turn. So do we change anything for the third game? I don't think we do. Could see taking out the Stasis Snare for a Crook of Condemnation just to cycle it essentially. But that also seems rather weak. Our opponent could still have something like a Torrential Gearhulk that they side in to catch people off guard. So our opponent gets to be on the play here. And this hand looks good, so we'll definitely keep. And I think we do run out to Sacred Cat turn 1, even though we could wait for the Metallic Mimic. Just want to try and curve out here. So let's hit for 1, and then play the Mimic on 2. That way, if we can play the Pouncer next turn, it'll get a +1/+1 counter. Unfortunately, drew the Stasis Snare, so that might be a dead card in this matchup, but we'll find out. Opponent does have the Essence Scatter for the Mimic. Could have been a reason to lead with the Pouncer, since don't mind that getting countered. Alright, we hit our land, that's good. So let's hit for 1, and then we have the option of Pouncer or Benefaction. I'm kind of leaning towards the Pouncer, just in the hopes of it getting countered, but it could also just get Stasis Snared, in which case I might want to play the Benefaction here. I think we'll go with the Pouncer. Alright, it resolves. Is there a Stasis Snare end of turn? Nope, just a cycled farmland. That's good news. 4 mana for the opponent, so they could Glimmer. So we want to try and prevent them from casting their Glimmer by playing something they kind of have to counter, like this Anointed Procession. Opponent takes it, and now we'll play the Procession. Of course, they could just have a Cast Out to deal with it, or a Supreme Will, that's fine. Can't pay for it. Alright, another Pouncer, so we can Pouncer plus Benefaction here. Hit for 3. Let's lead with the Benefaction. Alright, just have the choice of Sovereign or Pouncer, and definitely taking the Sovereign since we want a Pouncer in the graveyard. And then we can play out the other Pouncer from our hand. So now we have Pouncers for days, especially if our opponent casts a Fumigate as they Glimmer. Six lands. And yep, that's a Fumigate. And a Serpopard, so now we can just Eternalize one of our Pouncers. Opponent could have an Unsummon to bounce it, which would be a bit unfortunate, but cycles a Censor instead. Tapped farmlands, and the draw is Canopy Vista. So let's start by hitting for 4. Or rather 8. And there's a Stasis Snare to deal with it. So we could go Serpopard plus Sovereign, but I think it's still just better to Eternalize the Pouncer, and we can even get back the Sacred Cat as well, which helps us play around stuff like Blast Alliance. Supreme Will to look at the top 4, so we might see an approach soon. And yep, there's the approach of the second sun, and a Crested Sunmare, which plays nicely with our Sacred Cat. So let's hit for 9. And play out Sunmare and make a token right away. And even if they Fumigate, we get to keep our horse token since it's indestructible. Opponent says go. Alright, so we do have lethal on board, and nothing in hand really changes anything, so we will just go to combat here and see if our opponent has an answer. There's a Stasis Snare to deal with the Sunmare, I'm guessing. Nope, they go for the Pouncer to prevent more damage. So they do still take 11. We will get another horse end of turn. So playing Oketra seems pretty safe here. Or we can go Serpopard plus Sovereign. But I think I like Oketra more since that plays better around a sweeper effect. And we basically have to hope our opponent doesn't draw a second approach naturally. And Glimmer end of turn is certainly gonna help them get closer. In fact, they might draw the approach for their draw step here. Or it might still be one card down. From the looks of it, it might still be one card down. Since they had 2 draw steps, Glimmer, scry 2 to the bottom, draw 2, and in fact, they don't have an answer. Even a Fumigate wouldn't save them here. They would gain 5, but we get to keep Oketra and the 2 horses. Alright, sweet, managed to defeat blue-white approach, so on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw, and this hand looks pretty good, so we'll keep. Can go turn 2 Mimic into Pride Sovereigns. Opponent with a Game Trail, revealing Forest into an Attune, so this might be a Temur energy deck, or perhaps a Pummeler deck. We've seen Island, so it's most likely a Temur energy deck. Alright, Pouncer, so let's play tapped Vista, say go. Tapped Game Trail, and go. So I think we do just run out the Mimic. Very likely gets killed by either a Magma Spray or a Harness Lightning next turn, but that's a fine trade. And if we can play the Pouncer next turn, that's pretty powerful with the Mimic. So no Magma Spray end of turn. An Ether Hub to play, so let's see if they have the Pummeler. Alright, so they do have the Pummeler, so not a Temur energy deck after all. But we do have the Stasis Snare if we can find a land. Instead we find a Sacred Cat. So opponent has 6 energy. They can double twice. I think we just run out the Pouncer. We could also cycle cast out, try and hit our land drops and play a Sacred Cat, which would be a 2/2. I think we just run out the Pouncer here. And hit for 2. And hope we're not dead here. Invigorated Rampage into Harness Lightning. Yep, that'll do it. Opponent can pump the Pummeler a whole bunch of times, make it up to a 40 power creature and kill us. Alright, so yeah, we really needed that third land for the Stasis Snare, but did not find it. Alright, so pretty short game. Let's see if we can do anything after sideboard. So, Pummeler deck, we definitely want to Fragmentize just as a cheap answer to the Pummeler. The Fumigates and the Dusk Dawn are also interesting since they can deal with a Bristling Hydra. Solemnity is also a great addition since it stops any energy shenanigans. So these are the cards we're considering. Benefaction might be a bit slow. Anointed Procession might also be a bit slow. Could also consider shaving some Metallic Mimic since we're bringing in our Solemnities, but I think that's a fine problem to have if we draw the Solemnity. And let's see, what else do we take out? Could see taking out Oketra, although it does block a potential Rhonas from the opponent's deck. Could just see shaving a Sacred Cat, even though it is a good chum blocker against Bristling Hydras, but we are taking out the Anointed Processions, which make the Sacred Cat a bit worse. So this looks okay, and we will definitely be on the play. And this hand looks okay. Bit slow again. Our first plays on turn 4 unless we cycle the cast out. But hopefully things slowed down after sideboard. And if they play Pummeler on 3, we have the cast out on 4, so I think we'll keep. And play a tapped Vista. Say go. No turn to play, and there's our Solemnity, nice. So let's play a land and say go. So we're not gonna cycle the cast out here. And Longtusk Cub, that's fine, since we have a pretty nice answer in Solemnity. So it's just gonna be a 2/2. Rogue Refiner, 3/2 that draws a card, still not bad, but at least the opponent doesn't get any energy. Hits us for 2. And Sacred Cat is a nice setup for Crested Sunmare next turn, so I think we actually do play it here. Over the potential of cast out. And there's a Pummeler, which we don't really need to worry about anymore. Opponent gets in for 5, we'll take it since we want that a lifelink next turn for our Sunmare. So let's get in for 1. And play the Sunmare. Get a horse. And Harness Lightning, also not an answer for the opponent here. Instead another Rogue Refiner. And alright, our opponent scoops it up and can't deal with us getting a bunch of horse tokens. And we had pretty good follow-ups as well. Let's see what we would have drawn. Bunch of lands, Bright Sovereign would have been great, another Sacred Cat. So Solemnity, pretty good as it turns out. Might be a reason to keep in the Benefactions just to help us find the Solemnity, just because it is so powerful. That's actually not a bad idea. And then we can probably shave something like Oketra. Might not need both Ajanis. Dusk still seems okay. Fumigate still seems powerful. So yeah, we'll try it like this. I think our late game is good enough if we can find a Solemnity with just our Pride Sovereigns if our opponent can't kill them. They might bring in enchantment removal now after sideboard, but there's not much we can do about that. So could bring back in some Anointed Processions, since we are bringing back in our Benefaction, but it is still a relatively slow card, so we'll try it like this. Alright, and we find another hand with Solemnity. Opponent might now have an answer to it, but we're still keeping this. Metallic Mimic also not the greatest with a Solemnity, but turn 1 a tune, gets a forest. If they lead with Ether Hub and then play a tune, it's because they have no forests, of course. So let's play Vista, say go. And do they have a cub? Nope, another attune. So getting their energy while they still can. Another tune. No, a Greenbelt Rampager. Alright, that's fine. So down to 1 energy. And another Vista, but this time we'll play the Metallic Mimic. And we could name Horse, but I think we still are better off naming Cat here. Alright, let's hope that they don't have a powerful turn here and that Solemnity survives. There shouldn't be too many enchantment removal spells in the opponent's deck, but you never know. Pummeler brings them up to 5 energy, so they can already double at least once. So we'll just take 3 here. And yep, let's just run out Solemnity. Say go. A Rogue Refiner. The Fumigate should be pretty good. I'll take another 3. And Stasis Snare also not bad. Gives us an answer to the Pummeler should our opponent go for it. They could of course have Blossoming Defense, but they don't have enough energy where 1 pump spell is enough for them to win, so I think we can just sandbag the Stasis Snare. Keep it as insurance, but don't have to play it in our turn to play around Blossoming Defense. And then we have Fumigate for next turn. Hopefully they play something like a Bristling Hydra here. Harnessed Lightning doesn't do anything, unless they want to spend the energy they already had, which they do. And they're gonna hit us for a bunch. They could of course have Negate after Sideboard, which can counter our Fumigate, so that could be a reason to Stasis Snare right now, since otherwise we're dead if the Fumigate gets countered. Alright, let's Stasis Snare the Pummeler. That works. And there's a cast out. Do we play around this Negate or not? Could just run out the Crested Sunmare, which would be able to block the opponent's creatures. But I would feel a lot better if we can just Fumigate, get rid of these 2, and then tries to stabilize with the Sunmare. So I think we'll just go for the Fumigate after all. Negate would still be good, but at least we're not dead on the spot, and in fact our opponent does not have the Negate. Alright, so might have wasted a Stasis Snare, but better be on the safe side. Dusk Dawn also not bad, would have been great in this board with the 2 3/3s in play. So let's go ahead and play the Sunmare. No way to gain life right now, but still a 5/5. Opponent cycles a Thicket. Another Rogue Refiner. And an Adorned Pouncer. So I think we get in with our Horse. And then play Pouncer, keep up cast out. We will block here, since this would just be a trade, and we can eternalize the Pouncer. Invigorated a Rampage, so our opponent would hit us for a total of 7, or rather 6. That's still fine, we're not dead. If they go for another pump spell, we do have to go for the cast out. Blossoming Defense, alright, hopefully they don't have another Blossoming Defense. So is their last card a Negate or Blossoming Defense? It is not, and we win the match. Sweet. Alright, so Solemnity won us both sideboarded games there. And Crested Sunmare also pretty good if you have a Sacred Cat. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the play, and this hand looks okay, so we'll keep. So we have a tapped Vista on turn 1. Next turn, Fortified Village can come into play untapped, and we can play the Mimic. And then we can follow up with a Pouncer. Opponent with Plains into Fanbearer, so we might be up against a white zombies deck. So yeah, let's play Fortified Village, reveal the Vista, play the Mimic. So cats versus zombies, it looks like. And double Anointed Procession. Could be good. Embalmer's Tools, alright. So their opponent's gonna go heavy on the graveyard theme here. So let's play the Pouncer. Even though I don't really want to trade the Mimic for the Fanbearer. I think we want to be aggressive here. And we don't have any cats in hand currently. So I'm fine trading here. As the Fanbearer can lock up our Pouncer. So their opponent takes a trade. And they're gonna mill us for 1. Alright, play the Vista, say go. Another Fanbearer. Into Mummy Paramount. So 2/2 that can get bigger if they play the zombie. So let's just attack with our Pouncer here. Opponent takes 4. So Anointed Procession would be more mana efficient, but since we don't have anything currently that makes tokens, I would rather try to find a creature with the Benefaction. Alright, there's another Pouncer, which we could let go to the graveyard, but if we draw land next turn we can go Benefaction plus Pouncer, so I think we'll just take both here. Now 3 Anointed Processions in hand, a bit much. But at least we can't draw any more. Opponent still gonna mill us, even though we do have some graveyard synergy, so we'll see how that works out. Disposal Mummy. Alright, I guess that works. They can exile our Sacred Cat if they want to. Yep. So glad we took the Pouncer to our hand. Opponent hits us for 3 as well. Alright, there's a Pride Sovereign. So let's attempt to attack with the Pouncer. Opponent can block with the Mummy. Opponent might not want to block, since if we go lands Eternalize, then they're in trouble. Alright, let's just play out the Pride Sovereign here. If we find a land next turn, we can go Procession plus make some cat tokens. Opponent keeps milling us. There's another Sacred Cat, so that's good. And another Pride Sovereign. It's gonna be a long road to mill us out. Opponent swings in with everyone. They could have the Anthem effect for zombies here, giving their zombies +2/+1. So I actually think we just take it here. 5 isn't that much. And if they add another 6 on top, it's still not that much compared to the value we gain from the Pride Sovereign next turn. I guess we could block the Fanbearer. They go for their trick, and then we still trade the Pride Sovereign with the Fanbearer. Take 8. Maybe that's still fine. Alright, we'll block the Fanbearer and make them use a trick. Yep, there it is, in Oketra's name. And there's a Fortified Village coming into play tapped. But now we do get to play the Pouncer, embalm Sacred Cat. Could also just play the Procession, play a tapped Village, which might be fine here. And then next turn we can get back Sacred Cat and play the Pouncer. And then the question is, do we keep the Pouncer on defense or do we still attack? I think we go with the Pouncer plus the Sacred Cat here. Play a tapped Village. And then attack for 4. Those who serve. Opponent gets in for 3. So we could double block, would kill both our creatures. But I don't mind playing a longer game here. Alright, there's a Metallic Mimic. So we can play the Procession, or we can eternalize our Pouncer. Both options are pretty appealing. If our opponent has another Disposal Mummy, they would be able to exile the Pouncer next turn, which would be bad for us. I feel like we just go for one of the Processions here. And keep our Pouncer on defense this time. Even though we could trade it with one of the opponent's creatures, now I feel like we just want to play defense and not get blown out by double in Oketra's name. Fourth land for the opponent. Gets in for 4. I'll block the Disposal Mummy since we would still trade with an in Oketra's name here. There it is. Do they have a second one? They do. Alright, so glad we did not attack, otherwise we would have been dead now. But now we're at 4, but we can finally eternalize Adorned Pouncer and get back on track with our mana issues. Alright, and that does it. Sweet. So, sideboarding, what do we want to do here? Against the mono-white zombie stack, kind of aggressive. I'm liking the Fumigates. Prepare to Fight could be good if our opponent is relying too much on their combat tricks. Crook of Condemnation is interesting, although didn't look like the opponent had any particular synergies themselves that we need to break up with our Crook. Fragmentize could take care of their embalming tools, but that didn't really bother me all that much. So I think we just want to bring in the Fumigates and the Prepare to Fight. Can probably shave an Anointed Procession. Oketra might be a bit slow, although she does seem pretty good. Can probably shave some of our more expensive cards in this matchup. Maybe we go down on the Benefaction, given that our opponent has some ways to exile cards from our graveyard. And try it like this. And this opening hand looks acceptable. We've got early interaction in Stasis Snare, then Fumigate to clean things up, and then Regal Caracal to stabilize. No turn 1 play from the opponent. There's a Sacred Cat, which I will happily play. Binding Mummy. We'll just pass. And then we have to decide whether or not to play the Pride Sovereign or set up this Fumigate a bit better. They will tap down a Sacred Cat. Hit for 2. There's a Crested Sunmare. Alright, I think we don't have to be too greedy here, and playing out the Sovereign is gonna be fine. We might just win on board without needing to Fumigate. Mummy Paramount. taps down a Pride Sovereign, and Fanbearer taps down our Sacred Cat. So next turn we can just Stasis Snare plus Exert Pride Sovereign if we want to, and then we can, if we draw land, Fumigate. Oketra, I don't think we want to play her, so let's just pass a turn here. And we can also block with the Pride Sovereign and Exert, or we can Exert to be able to block with the 1/1 tokens. So a lot of options there. Opponent goes with the Disposal Mummy. Let's see what they want to tap down here with the Binding Mummy. So they are tapping down the Pride Sovereign, so in response we will Exert, make those 2 tokens. Could have Stasis Snared the Binding Mummy in response, of course, but I think this is fine. Opponent gets in with everyone. So how do we want to approach this? So we could double block the Fanbearer, chump the Mummy Paramount, and then Stasis Snare the Binding Mummy. It seems okay. I guess we want to make sure our Sacred Cat dies, so we can embalm it next turn if we want to. And then we'll Stasis Snare the Binding Mummy just to play it safe. Alright, so we don't take too much damage here. And there's our 5th land. But now I kind of like playing Oketra and embalming our Sacred Cat. That way we don't have to Fumigate yet, and we also don't overextend. Plus we can block with Oketra now. And their opponent has had enough. Sweet. So going forward, might shave a couple of Fortified Villages for more basics. But other than that, I did like the main deck and sideboard configuration. Maybe don't need all the Crooks of Condemnation since didn't really face any graveyard decks. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this gameplay. I hope you enjoyed. And as always, have a nice day. I also want to thank all my patrons for supporting the channel, and you can do so yourself as well over at patreon.com/LegenVD, where you get cool rewards for supporting the channel, as well as getting us closer to our goals, where with every goal reached, we will release an additional weekly series. So if you want to see more content, Patreon is the place to go.